Good evening, and welcome to a Fireside Chat with Zany Mystic. I am your host, Lance White, the Zany Mystic. I recently completed writing my first book, which is receiving wonderful reviews, and to read the reviews or purchase my book, please go to www.amazon.com and type in Tales of a Zany Mystic. My guest tonight is Miriam Delicado. Miriam piqued my interest as a person who has always had an array of abilities and sensitivities. She is able to heal, predict earthquakes, connect with crossed-over spirits, and astral travel. She also has psychic ability and gets premonitions. She was first contacted by extraterrestrials while a baby and was abducted for the first time at age 4. These particular events were not in her consciousness until much later in her life. The trigger that brought these occurrences back into her consciousness was an alien abduction experience while on a road trip in 1988. Her journey leads her to the Four Corners area of the southwestern United States. Since that time, there have been many other encounters with tall, blonde aliens. The relationship that developed between Miriam and the aliens became one of teacher-student, and finally culminated into that of emissary. As a direct request from the tall blondes, and to fulfill the role of emissary, she has written her book, Blue Star, Fulfilling Prophecy. In this book, Miriam recounts her experiences with the aliens, her travels to the alien safe lands, her meetings with Hopi elders, and the connections with indigenous peoples' prophecies. She also shares the aliens' history of man's creation and their involvement with Earth and the end times. Their message is for peace and hope for our future on Earth. Miriam tonight will discuss the communications she received, the connection to the Hopi prophecy and the end times. So, let's welcome her without any further ado to the show now. Hi, Miriam. How are you?
I'm doing very well tonight, Lance. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
You sound good.
Good.
Well, you have certainly had one interesting life, haven't you?
Well, it certainly keeps me on my toes, and my friends always have a good chuckle at everything that's happening around me. So, yes, I've had a very interesting
That's wonderful. Time. When did you first begin to notice that your experiences were different, say, than other kids?
Well, actually, ever since I was a very young child, probably close to, my first memories, my first clear memories and thoughts, real thought patterns, were, started as young as being a baby. But being able to conceptualize what it was that was happening around me, of course, didn't happen until a little bit later, until I was about 2 or 3 years old. And I do have some spotted memories of being that age and just feeling very different from other kids. And so that was the first time that I kind of thought that I didn't quite fit in with the people around me when I was about then. And as I got older, it seemed like every year that I got older, things got a little bit more interesting around me, but I was very quiet about it. I didn't actually share with very many of my friends all of these strange experiences, and it wasn't until much later in life, during my abduction on the highway in 1988, that some of these memories about spending time with these aliens came back to me. Because, of course, my memory growing up, I did not have conscious memory of being taken by aliens. But when I was 22 years old and I had the physical encounter with them on the highway, many of these memories from my childhood came back to me with great clarity, some of them. And so there's sort of two stories that I write about in my book, and one is, the way that my life unfolded, and then being able to look back on some of the events that took place and how they all connected with one another. It's rather fascinating, even to me.
A lot of people communicate that there's a reason why they're kind of kept in the dark until some kind of trigger moment, and then they're allowed to have all those memories rush back, and there's a reason for that.
Absolutely.
Do you want to talk? I'm curious about your encounter in 1988. What is it that happened? Were you driving in a car, or what was that experience like that triggered all of this?
It was completely life-altering.
Yeah.
Completely life-altering. I was 22 years old and living a very normal life for a 22-year-old at the time, and my friends and I took a trip from Vancouver, British Columbia, to my hometown in northern British Columbia.
Yeah.
And when we did, we were taking the trip back. There were some strange events that took place on this particular leg of the journey earlier on in the evening, where at one particular point I was sleeping, and I had a, quote, dream, or at that time I didn't realize that I was actually astral traveling. I got pulled out of my body. I can understand that now, but at that moment that it took place, I did not realize that. And I was greeted by a man and a woman who were telling me that they were coming for me soon and not to be afraid, and that they were my friends and family. And they said, do not be afraid, do not be afraid. So I kind of woke up from this really startled because of a number of events that had happened in the weeks prior to this particular day. And I, of course, could not share it with the people that I was with because I didn't think that they would understand.
Right.
And what was I going to tell them anyway, that I had a dream? It made no sense.
Right, right.
So when we were on the highway, there was 4 adults and a child, and the 2 adults in the front got tired of driving, so of course me and my friend, we switched and went up to the front. And it was getting a little bit later and quite a bit darker. It was around midnight or somewhere in around there. And as soon as we got on the road, there was some lights that came up behind us, and it followed us for over the course of probably hours. These lights would appear and disappear, meaning that they looked like a car coming up behind us, or some kind of a vehicle, truck lights or something, and would follow behind us quite closely, and then fall back as soon as we were going through a town, or other car lights were coming up to us, and that sort of thing. And it was really unnerving because they would never pass us, but they would always come up behind us rather quickly. So after hours of this happening, my friend and I went through a town by the name of 100 Mile House, okay? And when we went through this town, there's a really long stretch on the main street, and there's stoplights. You kind of come in from one side, go straight through on the highway, and when you get to the other side, there's a bit of a hill that goes to the right if you're traveling south. And when we got to the top of this hill, I turned and looked, and I said, okay, there's a really long stretch from where we were to the other side. There is no way that vehicle is going to catch up to us now. And then literally right after that, poof, there were the lights.
Wow.
So at that point, in the next few minutes after that, it was really, really quite frightening because we didn't understand what was happening. And these lights were, at this point, they were almost flashing on and off. You know, literally 1 second they were there, I would blink, and then they would be gone. And then they would come back, and then they would be gone. And after just a minute or so of this, I all of a sudden said to my friend, pull over the car. I was screaming at her, pull over the car, and she wouldn't do it. And I said, pull over the bleep, 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 bleep car right now. It's not you they want, it's me. And I thought, why am I saying that? And as I went to grab the steering wheel, she turned almost zombie-like and pulled over the car. And the car filled with white light. I mean, from every area, from above, from around, from everywhere. And when I looked behind me, as we stopped on the road, here were these 2 big balls of light behind the bumper of the car.
Wow. And
I couldn't understand where all this light was coming from, and I turned to the front of me, and there was a craft on the road.
Whoa.
So, of course, can you imagine? Oh, my goodness.
Wow. How large was it? A small one?
It was fairly small. It would take up probably close to the 2 lanes that were there for the small highway that we were on at the time. So it was a little bit smaller than, or close to 2 lanes wide.
Wow.
That's how wide it was. And it was so bright. It didn't hurt my eyes, but it was emitting a lot of light. It almost made it like daylight.
Wow.
And there was mist all over in the air, so I assume that it was warm because it was a cool night.
Yeah, yeah.
So if it was really hot in some way, it would be emitting some steam.
Huh.
And so it seemed misty in the air, and when I looked in front of me on the road, these small beings started coming out of the craft, out of the lighted area. I couldn't make any details out, though. And I could hear them speaking to me in my head, telling me to get out of the car, and so I did, and they came up to me and held me by the hand and were leading me off. Meanwhile, my friends they looked like they were in almost suspended animation.
Yeah, yeah.
And I took off with them, and these beings were about, 3.5, 4 feet tall, and they were very androgynous. They had dark black eyes, but they were round eyes. They were not pointed in any way, shape, or form. They were actually rather childlike. And they led me down the highway just a bit and to the left, and we started walking up an embankment. And when we got to the top of this little embankment, there was a much larger craft there. And standing in the doorway were 2 tall, blonde beings with blonde hair and blue eyes.
Wow. Wow, that's amazing. Jeez, what an exciting adventure that is. Jeepers creepers.
Well, at the time, I don't know how exciting I thought it was.
Well, you must have been just petrified. Well, except you had been kind of told you'd been warned, but still, nothing can prepare you for something like that.
No, and the first thought when I saw these beings was, why can't you just leave me alone?
Yeah, yeah.
And I've had a lot of people question me and say, well, if they're so friendly, why did you say that to them? And I thought, it's like your parents coming up to you and saying, could you please do the dishes?
Yeah, right.
How many times do they have to come up to you and say, would you mind doing the dishes, because they really need to get done?
Yeah.
It's sort of like that. It wasn't in anger or in hatred or in fear. It was like, oh, can't you just leave me alone?
Yeah, yeah. So now then what happened? The 2 smaller ones are leading you up towards the craft with the 2 tall blondes.
Yes. They led me up to the doorway where these tall blondes were standing, and they let go of my hand, and myself and the tall blondes walked onto the craft.
Wow.
And so I spent total, I figured this out later, it took me some time, but I did figure it out, that it was a total of 3 hours that I spent with them.
Wow.
Yes, which is, that's a good chunk of time.
It is a good chunk of time.
So the information that was imparted to me during this period was very profound and quite phenomenal, because even today it would be very difficult for me to sit down with someone and explain it to them. It would be impossible. One of the analogies that I use in order to describe this is that if I'm a rock climber, if I go out and I climb rocks, I'm a rock climber, and I do this on my weekend as a hobby. I'm going out, I'm having the experience of going rock climbing, and it's amazing, and I really want you to get involved, Lance. I want you to come out with me. I'm trying to convince you. I'm telling you all these great things. So we sit down all the time, and we have these conversations, and I show you pictures of rock climbing. I explain to you all of the equipment that you use, how to do everything, and then I talk about the feelings I have and why I love it, and I get into detail. Lance, just because I've told you everything that there is to know about rock climbing for the last 20 years, every day, doesn't mean that you understand it.
Oh, absolutely.
Until one day you pick up and you go and do it.
Yes, that's right.
And then you've had that experience. Well,
that's right.
What happens during this time with these beings, the reason I believe that when someone has these encounters that they are profoundly affected by the experience is that when they teach us and show us information about the world or about ourselves or humanity or the existence of all that is, they give you the, quote, experience of doing it. So instead of them telling me about rock climbing, what they did was they said, okay, somehow, I don't know how it happens, they gave me that experience as though I've actually gone rock climbing. Does that make sense?
Like a download.
It's like a download.
Yes.
But a download of not just information, but of the actual experience. That is something that is, I believe, is a key to why many people like myself feel compelled to share this information and knowledge. It's because we truly understand in the core of ourselves that what they have talked to us about is very important, and we understand how it is connected to all of humanity, which, of course, is the whole purpose of, I believe, why they are contacting the people of Earth and always have. It's because they had a hand in creating us as human beings, and it does not mean in any way that they are God, but they did have a hand in creating humanity. The human being, the body that holds the souls of all of us. And these bodies help us to remain in this particular realm so that we have the ability to experience the beauty all around us in a way that is not possible anywhere else. And it is only because of the creations of us when we get here that the Earth has become as disjointed and chaotic and war-filled as it has. And these are many of the messages that these beings, are trying to bring forward to the people of Earth at this time, is that we need to begin building a new philosophy for life and how we are going to communicate with one another and live with one another, and how we can better feed our own spiritual selves through understanding the beauty around us. That's a fundamental part of why these beings are coming to the people of Earth.
One thing, I have spoken with other people who have all gotten similar messages, but it seems like, given the nature of humanity, the way that it's set up, the way that people are brainwashed and the media is controlled, and the cards seem to be stacked against that. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Do they give you any clue as to how we could actually make these changes? I mean, a lot of people believe that it's almost too late. That the Earth is on a track now that can't be reversed.
For myself, in the knowledge that I have received, the knowledge that I understand, I will never look at it that way. I will never be pessimistic about it, for sure. Because I believe that humanity has the ability to change at any given moment in time. I believe that one person can change the world, and this might seem a little bit, flighty even to say that out loud, but it is true.
No, it is. That I agree with you on that.
And really so there is always hope for humans. There is always hope for the Earth. Now, some of the things that these beings came forward with me and showed me were, quote, possibilities of Earth. Possibilities of futures that were not positive.
Oh, okay, yes.
But you see, as a person who has, I'm a sensitive. I'm sensitive to things. So sometimes I pick up on things and I have premonitions and dreams or all sorts of different things that I can experience.
Yeah, yeah.
I learned a very long time ago through having many of these experiences that when we see the future, or when we think we see the future, and it is something that is really dark and not positive, which is usually what happens, the reason that we have them is because it is a gift to you. It is a gift to me. It is a gift to whoever it is that's involved. So they're gifts to us so that they say, okay, if you continue on the same path that you're on right now, this is what's going to happen. And they show you what's going to happen at the end of it.
Yeah.
So then you have the gift of being able to say, oh, hey, you know what? I can change this little piece over here. And that's what it's going to take to change that outcome.
Yeah.
So these prophecies that people are talking about on the planet, which everyone's quite involved in recently, become the big thing to talk about as prophecies and premonitions and dreams of the future. These things, and as well as the warnings that were given to us by these tall blondes, all of them can be averted if humanity has the ability to change. The question really remains, what is it that we need to change? When and how much time do we have? So because no one can say this for certain, and there is no one on the planet that will ever be able to give you the answer to this, and if they can, I would say to them that possibly they're not seeing it clearly.
Right, right.
Because everything is in constant change.
Absolutely.
So because we can't give a time date to this, what I'm going to say is I will never look at it and say anything is too late. I will say, let's do the best that we can today for who we are in our lives. In my life, I try to do the best I can with certain things on a daily basis.
Right, right.
I, by absolutely no means, am perfect, and I do things that I know I could be doing differently. But we also live in a world that is quite structured, so it's difficult for us to make that change. But together we can. And we are. We're all making a difference. We're all finding our own voice. And really, the most important thing I believe that people can do to make a difference in the world today are a couple of things. Educate themselves. Educate themselves on the alien presence, not only of the positive alien presence, but also on the negative alien presence.
Right.
I believe that they can educate themselves spiritually, because if they find knowledge within, it is the most valuable tool that they can ever find, is the voice within. So that spiritual voice within them, to educate themselves on what's happening around them. Another thing that I believe that they can do in order to make a change in the world is really educate themselves on seeds and what's happening on the planet today with seeds. Because what is happening with the planet as far as the food is concerned and the seeds, where the seeds are, what's happening to them, the genetic modifications that are being done, where the food is being grown, who's controlling the food, which all boils down to seeds. It will bring you full circle back to one thing, Lance.
Yeah.
All of those things will lead you to one thing. And it will lead you back to a greater respect and understanding of the earth. And by doing that, you're going to connect right back in with your spirit. And by doing so, we will all find the voice within in order to make the changes to make this into a better world. And I truly believe that.
Were you given any information about these particular times being a period of a harvest time or a time of shifts? Say, that you have the Mayan calendar that ends in 2012. The Hopis also have their form of the same prophecy. Do they say that these events are coming to a head in the near future, around 2012?
Well, I can say from direct knowledge. Now, I need to be very clear here and very careful, Lance.
Okay.
Okay. I need to make this statement to make it clear.
All right.
I do not speak on behalf of Hopis, and I do not speak on behalf of the Mayans.
Okay.
Okay?
All right.
However, I do have people that I know that are Hopis, and I do have people that I know that are Mayans. And in my conversations with them, it has come up that 2012 means absolutely nothing to them.
That's interesting.
It's very interesting.
Yes.
And so one of the things that I have been asked for the last 20 years, since 1988, has been about 2012.
Yeah.
And for 20 years, I've told people that 2012 meant nothing to me.
Well, that's a novel way to see it. That's certainly different.
Well, 2012 doesn't mean anything to me, and it doesn't mean anything to the Mayans if you go and ask them, apparently. Now, I've spoken to some of them, someone who I believe is credible enough to be able to share this information, and 2012 is the end of the Mayan calendar in that sense, yes, and we are in a time that is a time of transition and change, absolutely. How that transition and change is going to take place and how it is taking place right now is dependent on us.
Yeah.
Because the information about who we are and where we're from and where we're going, the reason for our existence, and how the earth is being controlled and run right now, not only by government, but also by ourselves. We're the ones running things. All of us. All of us have a hand in that.
Well, that's kind of our collective choice, isn't it? A collective consciousness that is making these decisions from moment to moment?
Yes. In part, yes. Absolutely.
But aren't there also other... I've read that there are other non-benevolent ETs and aliens that are working behind the scenes that are not in our behalf.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. There are. And when I was with the Tall Blondes, they have told me more than once that they are here to help to protect the planet, not only from ourselves, but also from anything outside the planet that we may not be aware of.
Oh, I'm sure there's plenty.
So, yes, exactly.
I'm sure there's plenty that we're not aware of.
So
we're hardly aware of what's going on our own planet behind the scenes.
Yes.
Let alone, what other races from other civilizations might be up to.
Yes. Going back to 2012 for a minute, if I might.
Sure.
The transitional time that we're currently in, I mean, I've been told for 20 years that there were certain things that were going to begin to take place on the planet. And it was they taught mostly about how mankind would come to a point in their lives, in the progression of life, where there would be a time when there would be greater understanding and knowledge that would be given to all of humanity. Now, what they also said was that during this particular transition time, it would depend on humanity for how long or how short of a time this transition took place.
Yeah, right.
So the knowledge and information that we're bringing forward to the world, Lance, yourself, people like you, you're the only reason that I can come forward. People that have been working to educate people for years and years and years. People who have, they've been working for 40 years, some people, as long as, for longer than I've been alive.
Right.
And helping to bring information forward. So we've been in this transitional phase for quite some time.
Yeah.
We were not quite at the peak yet of this informational flow, and so we still have a ways to go on that. I believe it's going to be years, and 2012 could be close to that time when there's going to be a rollover, meaning that there's going to be a great change and a great wave of information that comes to the people of the earth. And by doing so, by all of this information coming forward to all of the people of Earth through, quote, mainstream media, for example,
right,
that will help in the transition of mankind. And it will help to make it so that the, quote, collective consciousness is then opened up even more and it becomes even stronger. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So what I was told was that this particular time, the, quote, end times, would be a time of great change for everyone on the earth, and that there were potentials and possibilities of great massive destruction on the planet.
Mm-hmm.
But this was not set in stone. This was not a for sure by any means. And that even if there was, an, quote, one area on Earth where maybe a meteor comes and hits the Earth, it still meant that the rest of the Earth would be okay and survive.
Right, right.
But if there are things that are coming that we are not aware of, this transitional phase of knowledge that we have the ability to go forward and learn as much as we possibly can right now, I believe these tools that we are being taught, these tools that we are teaching ourselves and being given in this shift are going to help us to move forward if there is some sort of cataclysm on the planet.
Mm-hmm.
That these are the things that will help us to continue as a species and as Earth.
And continue to evolve beyond just the basic needs and believing that we're just a body that...
Yeah,
exactly.
See, now, this is where it gets interesting, okay?
All right.
As if what I've said isn't interesting.
Keep going.
All right. These beings explained to me how... It was like going to grade 1. They didn't give me the university education on it. They just gave me the basics on it, okay?
Okay.
So what happened was they tried to create mankind. They tried to create a vehicle in which a soul would be able to incarnate into and be able to have these experiences on the earth.
Okay.
So in the first and second world, they were kind of a failure, pretty much completely.
Okay.
Now in the third world, what they did was they decided to create this vehicle quite structured. They decided, okay, we tried to make something evolve on its own in order to facilitate this soul, but nothing happened. So we're going to have to give it some structure. So that's where mankind came in. That's where the vehicle, these bodies came from.
Okay.
Now, over thousands and thousands of years that mankind has been around, we have been, quote, genetically modified. Now, one of the reasons that these genetic modifications have taken place have not been to, quote, dumb us down. It's been to slowly give us information, enable us to accept more and more information. Because, you see, in the last world, they created the body, and they gave it all the knowledge.
Uh-huh.
So that we would be able to incarnate and poof, we'd have all of this knowledge. And they found that what happened was everyone kind of went crazy.
Huh.
And when they went crazy, they started, they didn't understand because, for example, every person in the last world understood that they had this body and that when it was gone, this body would not be, quote, the end of them, that they would go on.
Right.
And they understood this much better than we do today. And they started thinking, oh, well, I don't care. Let's make a different body. Let's do this and this and this over here. It was like getting children at the age of 2 to bake bread.
Uh-oh.
You know?
Yeah.
They had all of the ingredients, and they knew how to turn the oven and the stove on, but they were 2 years old.
Oh, jeez.
So it was very destructive, and that's
imagine.
why a decision was made to sort of wipe the earth clean. So this is the third time they've done this. However, there were certain people on the planet at that time that were very highly evolved and that they'd been able to understand the full reasoning, and their bodies, in other words, the DNA of those beings, was able to hold that information and knowledge without going crazy. So they were spared. and brought to this, which they called the fourth world. Okay? Got to stop me if I get confusing, Lance.
You're fine so far.
Okay. Thank you. The fourth world is where we're currently residing. Now, in the fourth world, man was created again. There were different bodies made to see how this evolving would take place. So it's like having about 5 different families on the earth.
Okay.
And all of these different families evolved, and they wanted them to evolve on their own. They wanted to leave them alone. But at the same time, from those 5 families, certain branches of them were constantly monitored. Thus, those of us who have had ET contacts through families over and over and over again. These are the people that have been monitored. The rest of them, they kind of let them go, and they allow them to just evolve on their own, and they leave them alone.
Mm-hmm.
So really, new DNA and new changes to the DNA structure have been modified through these particular families who have been monitored since the beginning of the fourth world.
Okay.
Okay. Now, in that, slowly over time, rather than giving us all of this knowledge, poof, all at once, these families have very slowly, the DNA has been slow to facilitate more and more knowledge.
Okay.
And these are the people that are coming forward now saying, okay, I've had contact all my life, so has my family, this and that, this and that. We, at this particular time, are being fed information and knowledge by these beings through the dream state,
mm-hmm.
And through the conscious state as well, and people may not realize that. We are being educated by all of these people who are having all of this knowledge come to them, and they're able to understand it and accept it, and then assess it, put it in the right place in the brain, and then reiterate it to the rest of the world again, to be able to share all of this knowledge.
Okay.
And so through this process, the eventual outcome is that we will be able to be here with much greater knowledge than we currently have, meaning we will have telepathy and dreams, and we'll all be, quote, psychic.
Yeah, right.
Don't particularly care for that word, so we'll all be sensitive to things.
Right.
We will all have a greater understanding, and because of that energy coming in, we will all automatically just raise up even higher and have much more knowledge, understanding. We will be able to create an earth that is much different than what we're currently living in. And so the shift that people are talking about, when I talk about the end times, they're end times, yes, and they could possibly be dark and very difficult for us.
Yeah.
But it's not because of what we're doing or these ETs are doing. It's because if war breaks out because of food or oil,
right,
because of the economies,
right, in
this current structure, it could get very difficult for us for a time. But what's going to keep us together is that those of us who are still have this knowledge, we're the ones that are going to step forward and say, all right, this is how to build a new world. This is how we can build a new world. This is how we can start from the ground up. This is the structure that maybe we should think about when we build something. Instead of building a school where we stick children in for, 6 to 8 hours a day, mm-hmm. and teach them virtually nothing.
Right.
Let's build a school where we're teaching them all of these things. But instead of teaching them about, the past, and what rocks are, everyone learns about all the different kinds of rocks in school. Let's get them to go out and spend a day down at the river.
Oh, yeah. That'd be great.
Let's truly teach them about rocks and the energies that they hold and the beauty that they have. Let's engage the mind.
Oh, absolutely.
And by doing so, we engage the spirit and the soul.
Yep.
And then we are engaged in the earth and with one another. It's very simple, Lance. Really. But when it comes down to it, everyone wants, 500 pages of information on who these beings are and what they're doing. But they want them to come here and tell us what to do.
Well, yeah, of course.
I don't want that.
Of course.
I don't.
But as you say, it's a matter of connecting with what is.
Yes.
And connecting at the level of spirit and intuiting how things are. In other words, people talk to trees, there are animals, grass. You can communicate with all of those things.
Absolutely.
And we've lost the ability to do that because we're so disconnected from life.
Yes.
So, now you mentioned the energy coming in. I'm curious about how the logistics of that. How will the energy come in? Is that a cosmic energy that's galactic-wide, or is that something specific to our planet, or how will the energies come in that are going to raise the frequencies and vibrations of the people on the planet?
Beautiful question. Thank you so much for asking me that, because to me it is a very important part of what I try to share with people.
Oh, good.
Great question. Thank you. When people have often said to me how all of this is going to take place and how it is taking place and what needs to be done, so often in life, no matter what it is that we're doing, we always look outside of ourselves. When someone is having difficulty with a breakup, we look outside of ourselves for support. And we all need all of those things that are exterior to us in order to help guide us. But in reality, the only way that we're truly ever going to get over that breakup is to find it within ourselves, find the peace within ourselves and the quiet.
Yep.
So what happens in life and with these teachings with people, and I get this sometimes, people will have said to me, "Oh, I didn't get anything from you. I don't listen to what you're saying." And everyone says that about everyone at some point. What I hear from those people is sadness. I hear that they are not connected with who they are. Right. Now, what does this have to do with the energies coming in? When someone has great knowledge or great spirit, when there is an individual that is trying to teach a class on how to communicate with animals or how to connect with yourself or any of these things, if they're walking around and they're saying it like a textbook, like they are in the classrooms of today, it means nothing. But if that person is standing at the class at the top, at the head of the class, if they're standing at the head of the class and they themselves are holding that very energy, that means pulling it in themselves, what it is that they're trying to teach to those people, then here's what happens, Lance. They walk down the aisle of the class, and as they are doing so, the student then becomes part of the energy field of that teacher. And when that happens, that student picks up on that energy and all of a sudden is whisked by it and takes a breath, and they are touched by it, and therefore they can then bring some of those molecules of that beautiful energy into themselves. And if they allow themselves to do that, they become enlightened very slowly, because it's like the drops of rain. A drop of rain has just been brought into the top of their head, and by doing so, they now know the path for the rest of that energy to flow.
Right.
So when people all over the planet, one of the best things that they can do is to, educate themselves and bring that energy in themselves and really pull it into their own bodies, because by doing so, every single person that they encounter, they are sharing that energy with. And when they share that energy with just the people around them and the knowledge, they are enlightening the entire planet, and that is how that energy is being brought in, and that's how that energy has been brought in for a very long time now. Yeah, that's pretty much my understanding of it too. That it requires a channel, and we're the channels. Yeah.
And the more we're able to hold well, you can call it light energy, if you want, or light technology. The more we're able to hold that and expand our ability to hold consciousness and awareness, the more we affect literally everything.
Yes.
Because we are literally everything.
Yes.
We're in the quantum field, so we're not just these limited bodies and, with these lives and this job and that car and that relationship. We are literally all of it. And so every thought we have and emotion affects everything else, like billiard balls. And so the higher we can raise our own vibrations and frequencies, the higher the whole goes. At least that's part of how I understand it.
Well, it sounds to me like you understand it fairly well from my view, because, I say this only because I would like people to know this. I have a lot of these wonderful things to share with people, but no matter who it is that's here on the planet, whether it's the Dalai Lama or myself, we are simply human beings.
Right.
And we are here possibly to share our knowledge, spiritual knowledge with others, but we are still human. And because we are human, we have still chosen to live our paths in our lives. And so these energies that we bring in, I bring in some very strong energy at times. I know that I do that.
Oh, I can tell you do. I'm sure you do. I can tell just by talking to you.
And so there's some pretty interesting things that happen around me.
I bet. I'd love to be near you.
Sometimes it can be rather interesting. But at the same time, one of the ways that I love to open myself up completely in the moments that I do, in the moments that I pull in that energy, allow it to just wisp out to the earth and to the people of earth as well. One of my favorite things to do in life, and always has been ever since I can remember, is to listen to the wind.
Oh, yes. Yes, absolutely.
Now, one of the great things about doing this is that when I do, the first thing I do is I kind of quiet myself, and then I just say to the wind, I'm listening. And what's interesting for me is that every time I ever do this, just for a split moment, no matter how windy it might be, it slows right down to be very quiet, and then it picks right up again.
Oh, yeah.
And so when I am sharing that energy, and no matter what the moment is, I'm connecting with everything around me. And by raising our own vibrational level, by raising our own understanding of what it is that's around us, in this earth, in this universe, in this time frame. We're not really in time, though. There's no such thing. That's a whole other show.
Right.
All of these things, it boils down to each one of us raising our own vibrational level, and by doing so, we share with the earth and with everyone around us.
Right.
And so when people say there's nothing for me to do, there's nothing that I can do, I tell them, educate yourself, educate yourself, educate yourself.
Oh, yes.
Spiritually, and physically, by learning about the ET presence, learning about the seeds, learning about what it is that is going on around you, and by really trying to be an example where you feel you can, because we can't be examples of everything to everybody. We can choose something and say, here, on this particular subject, I love this area. For me, I've educated a lot of people about seeds and what's happening with them.
Well, that's quite a scary proposition right now. I'm assuming that you're talking about the seed bank that's been created.
Oh, I'm talking about, Lance, we should do a show just on seeds.
We should, and the genetically modified seeds.
Yes.
And how it's one of my, well, it's not my favorite subject because it's such an unpleasant one, but
it is.
It really needs to be brought into the light of day because it has the most potential to really cause a disruption of, for generations to come.
The situation with the seeds on the planet is so dire that if I had to choose one thing if I had to say, okay, I'm only allowed to talk about one thing, I would talk about seeds.
Yep.
And also, even for myself, I've been privy by the tall blondes to information about seeds.
Okay,
they've talked to me about seeds to a certain extent, so there's a little blurb on that. But I have only been educating myself about seeds over the last probably 4 or 5 years, and I am by no means an expert, but I understand how it is, what it is, the relationship between, how it all comes together. I understand that, so absolutely, I love talking about that as well. And at the end of every presentation that I do, I always ask people to leave and educate themselves about seeds.
Yes. And of course, another one that's starting to crop up is the death of the honeybee.
Yes.
That's another. But then there's the death of the oceans, the spots that are literally dead.
Yes.
We have a lot of problems that are coming to a head.
Yes.
And I think it's going to require. I think it was Einstein that said that you can't solve these problems at the same level that they were created.
No. There is something though that could be said about seeds, and the education that a person could find in for themselves in regards to this particular subject matter. When it comes to seeds and the understanding of what it is that's currently happening today, if you start to do that, you will reconnect in with who you are as a human being. You reconnect with the earth. And that, because I know we only have a couple of minutes left. I want to tie this all in together.
Okay.
And bring it all into a nice circle.
All right.
The beings that I've had contact with, I call them the tall blondes, because they're tall and they're blonde. And I can't remember if they told me where they were from, and I'm not going to, sit down and ask them in a meditation, because I'm just not going to. Now, what happened is these tall blondes have been a part of humanity and a part of life here on Earth since before this particular planet was even started. They're the caretakers of this Earth, and they are gravely concerned over the path that humanity is taking. But they will not interfere with humanity whatsoever. Now, in saying that, there were people that were taken from, quote, the third world into the fourth world, which is what we're currently living in. These people that were taken from this past world were the indigenous people of this earth. These were the people that were supposed to be our leaders and our teachers. And as you can look over what has happened to them, they have been persecuted by people for a very, very long time. Thus, the dark forces that are here on the earth, possibly alien. I agree. Now, in saying that as well, these indigenous people have prophecies, all of them. If their people remember the prophecies, if they haven't been torn apart enough, they still hold these prophecies. And the Hopi of of Arizona and the Mayan people from South America are two that have been talked about a lot by many people. There are other indigenous peoples all over the earth that have similar or the same prophecies. They also hold and carry the same, quote, knowledge. And Lance, it's going to be very interesting what happens in the next 6 to 8 months with a number of these things, because the indigenous people have slowly been coming forward with some of the knowledge that they've been holding for thousands of years regarding prophecies and creation stories and stories of the future.
Oh, that's wonderful.
It will be very interesting for us as humanity, because you see, everyone is saying, what are we to do?
Right.
And I believe the indigenous people have the answer for us.
I agree.
And that if and when they come together, I believe that they will, and there's so much I would love to be able to share with you. I'm taking a trip to South America, and so when I come back from that particular journey, I'm hoping that I will have much more that I'm able to share with everyone. the situation on the planet with what we're facing with in respect to food, oil, water, the oceans, the earth, how we're living in a very materialistic world.
Yep.
I believe all of these things are resolvable. I truly do.
Yep.
They will never be resolved overnight. So anyone that ever says that it's too late, I would say to them, please, I beg of you to step aside and allow us just to continue doing what we're doing, one day at a time.
Yeah.
We don't need to be aggressive.
Yeah.
We need to be focused.
Right, and in alignment.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Alignment with the earth.
Yes, absolutely.
And these messages that these tall blonde beings have for us, they are very important. And I know that there's so much talk out there right now that is really dark about who these beings are and that their agendas are really, really dark and evil. But what I would say is this: how could it possibly be so? These beings have taught me that it is important to have respect for other human beings, for the earth, for each other, that we don't need to be wasteful, that we need to respect the earth. How are these things dark and evil?
Exactly.
There's nothing more that needs to be said on that.
Exactly. And on that statement, before we run out of time, I want you to be able to tell people how they can find your book and your website, because it's fascinating.
Thank you. I do have a blog area on my website, and my website is www.alienbluestar.com. That, again, is alienbluestar.com, and they can pick up my book from there.
Good.
Rather than big business.
Right.
But it is available all over on the Internet, but you can pick it up from me. The other thing is I have a blog there in the community section. You can email me and ask me questions.
Wonderful.
And, yes, so that would be fantastic. I'd love to hear from people.
And Miriam, I would really like to have you back again, because it seems like I had dozens of questions that I wanted to ask you, and I was enjoying our conversation so much that I just kind of let it go wherever it went. Okay, we have 30 seconds. Well, thank you very much, Miriam.
Thank you.
And many blessings to you, and I'd love to have you back on the show again.
I'm looking forward to it, Lance.
Wonderful, and have a good trip to the Mayan areas.
Thank you so much.
All right, thank you for sharing yourself.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.